Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right in your relationship, but your partner still pulls away? You express your love, you show up, you try to communicate, and yet they seem to drift further and further into silence. They need space when you need closeness. They go quiet when things get emotional. You're left second-guessing yourself, wondering if you're too much or if something's wrong with you. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone, and you're not the problem. You're likely dealing with a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And the truth is, their definition of a healthy relationship might be completely upside down compared to yours. Hey, I'm Jim Rohn, and today we're going deep into the avoidance mind to uncover what they truly believe a secure, loving relationship should look like. Spoiler alert, it's not about emotional closeness, vulnerability, or deep mutual support, not in the way you might expect. For dismissive avoidance, a healthy relationship often means distance autonomy and minimal emotional demands. And unless you understand this dynamic, you'll keep playing a game where the rules were never explained to you. You'll keep giving more, chasing harder, and wondering why they're still slipping away. This video is going to reveal the avoidance hidden blueprint, the one shaped by early emotional neglect and reinforced by a lifetime of self-protection. We'll talk about why consistency confuses them, why vulnerability scares them, and how even if they care about you deeply, they may interpret your love as pressure. But more importantly, we'll talk about what you can do about it, how to respond like someone with a secure attachment, how to stop abandoning your own needs in the name of keeping the peace, and how to see their behavior not as a rejection, but as a reflection of their own fear of closeness. So, if you're tired of chasing after breadcrumbs and calling it connection, if you're ready to understand these patterns so you can protect your peace and stand in your worth, this is your space. This channel is here to help you decode emotional avoidance, build secure habits, and finally stop trying to earn love that should be given freely. If that resonates with you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Let's get into the truth and start reclaiming your power in love. Now, to really understand a dismissive avoidant, you have to go back to the root of where this all started, their early childhood. Most dismissive avoidants didn't grow up in homes filled with emotional warmth or open communication. Instead, they often had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable, distant, or even critical. These weren't necessarily bad parents. They may have done their best, but they didn't know how to show up emotionally. So the child learned something deep and unspoken. If I express my needs, I'll be disappointed. If I reach out for connection, no one will really be there. That belief settles in like concrete. I can't rely on others. So what does that child do? They adapt. They stop reaching out. They learn to meet their own needs. Maybe they become the good kid who never causes problems, or the independent teen who never asks for help. Over time, they get really good at self-soothing, maybe through distraction, staying busy, or even shutting down their own emotions. And while that worked for survival as a kid, it becomes a huge barrier in adult relationships. Because now connection feels risky. Needing someone feels weak. And the one thing that helped them cope, emotional distance, is now the thing that pushes love away. Let me give you an example. Say you're dating someone who seems sweet, attentive, even romantic at first. They text, often make plans, and you feel a spark. But a few weeks in, right, when things start to feel real, they start pulling back. They take longer to reply. They say they're busy more often. Maybe they cancel plans last minute. You're confused. What happened? The truth is, the closeness activated something old and hidden in them. Something that says, uh-oh, this might be too much. I might lose myself. I better pull away before it gets scary. That's the core wound of a dismissive, avoidant closeness. Feels like danger, not safety. 1. Support is restrict for autonomy. Now here's where things start to really make sense, because dismissive avoidants don't define a healthy relationship the same way you might, especially if you have an anxious or secure attachment style, where someone with a secure style might see closeness, open communication, and emotional expression as signs of a strong relationship. Avoidants often see those same things as overwhelming or even threatening. Their version of healthy looks a lot different. For them, support doesn't mean constant togetherness. It means respect for autonomy. To a dismissive, avoidant, love is felt most when they are given space to breathe, think, and be alone without pressure. It's not that they don't care. In fact, they might care deeply. But the moment they feel like their independence is being threatened, or that someone is expecting too much emotionally, they start to feel unsafe. Their nervous system treats it like a red flag, and they begin to retreat. That retreat isn't necessarily about you. It's about protecting their emotional territory. Let's take a real-life example. Imagine you're dating someone who disappears for a few hours after a minor disagreement. You text them trying to repair or check in, but they don't respond. Maybe they ghost for a day or two, then return like nothing happened. It feels infuriating, right? You're stuck, stewing in anxiety, and they're off regaining their balance. To you, it feels like abandonment. But to them, it's regulation. They need that time alone to soothe themselves. They may not even see that their silence is hurting you, because in their world, needing space means restoring peace, not rejection. And here's something really important. Emotional safety for them is tied to not being punished for needing that space. If they sense that you'll guilt them, chase them, or shame them for withdrawing, they shut down even more. They learned early in life that depending on someone, especially in moments of vulnerability, often led to disappointment. So if they feel like you're going to use their need for space against them, it reactivates that old wound. And instead of moving closer, they'll move even further away. This doesn't mean you should tolerate being ignored or put last, but it does mean that how you approach them in those moments matters. A secure partner might say, "I understand you need some time. Just let me know you're okay and we can talk when you're ready." That one sentence can go a long way for an avoidant. It gives them the space they need while showing them you're still emotionally present, without pressuring them to perform emotionally before they're ready. So when you understand that their version of love is filtered through the lens of independence, not intensity, you start to see their behavior differently. You stop taking it so personally. It's not about you being unlovable. It's about them not yet feeling safe enough to lean in. Understanding that doesn't mean excusing it, but it does give you the clarity to choose how you want to respond. Do you bend yourself to accommodate this pattern, or do you hold your boundaries and ask for mutual effort? That's where your power lies. 2. Consistency and clarity. Another huge part of understanding a dismissive avoidant is realizing just how much they struggle with ambiguity and emotional guessing games. This is where so many misunderstandings in relationships begin. Dismissive avoidants often don't pick up on emotional cues the way someone with a secure or anxious style might. If you expect them to read between the lines, hint at what you want, or wait for them to just know how you're feeling, they won't. Not because they don't care, but because their emotional radar works differently. What seems obvious to you might completely miss their radar. Think of it like this. A dismissive avoidant grew up believing, I have to handle everything on my own. So they learned not to expect emotional support. They became hyper-independent. And because of that, their instinct is to assume everyone else wants the same, so they expect you to handle your emotions too. Now, if you come to them upset, but don't clearly say why they might freeze or shut down, not because they're trying to hurt you, but because emotional uncertainty is overwhelming. They don't know what's expected of them, and that makes them feel like they are failing, which leads them to withdraw even more. Let's say your avoidant partner comes home late and you're upset. Instead of saying, "Hey, I felt anxious when I didn't hear from you. Can you let me know next time you stay quiet, but cold?" You hope they'll notice your tone, pick up on your mood, and ask what's wrong. But they don't. Instead, they assume you need space and give it to you, which only makes things worse. You feel ignored. They feel confused. The disconnect grows. What works better is direct, calm communication. Avoidants actually do better when things are stated plainly. Saying something like, "It helps me feel connected when you check in," gives them a clear action they can understand and respond to. It's not emotional pressure, it's information. That clarity builds trust because they stop feeling like they're always guessing or doing something wrong. So if you're dealing with a dismissive avoidant, know this: they don't need drama. They need clear signals. The more direct and consistent you are, the more emotionally safe they'll feel, and the less likely they are to withdraw. You're not being too much by having needs. You're just learning to express them in a way they can receive. And that's a big step toward creating real connection. 3. Acceptance without criticism. One of the most important things to understand about someone with a dismissive avoidant attachment style is how deeply sensitive they are to criticism, even the mildest form. On the outside, they may seem confident, independent, maybe even a little emotionally detached, but inside, most dismissive avoidants carry a core wound of defectiveness, a deep-rooted belief that something is wrong with them. This often starts in childhood when they didn't feel emotionally safe, loved, or accepted as they were. So, even as adults, any kind of feedback that feels like judgment can hit a nerve. They don't know how to talk about it, just hurts. Let's say you make a comment like, "I wish you were more emotionally available," or "You never talk about your feelings." From your point of view, you might be trying to express a need or start a conversation. But to a dismissive avoidant, that might sound like, "You're not enough. You're broken. You're the problem." That one comment can confirm a fear they've carried for years. If I open up, I'll be judged. If I show who I really am, I'll be rejected. So instead of responding with curiosity or care, they shut down. They may get defensive, dismissive, or even lash out anything to get away from the feeling of being exposed or not good enough. That's why emotional vulnerability feels dangerous to them. They don't just fear being hurt, they fear being seen and then abandoned for what's underneath. So, if you come at them with criticism, even gentle, it often triggers that old survival instinct to retreat and protect. It's not always logical, and they may not even realize it's happening, but it's why they can seem so reactive or distant when you bring up issues. Now, this doesn't mean you can't express your needs or talk about what's not working in the relationship. You absolutely can and should. But how you say it matters. Using I statements leading with reassurance and being specific can make a big difference. For example, I feel disconnected when we don't talk about what's on our minds. I'd love for us to be able to share more openly lands very differently than you never open up. The goal isn't to walk on eggshells, it's to communicate in a way that doesn't activate their shame. Because when they feel accepted instead of judged, they're more likely to stay present and engage. And that's where real growth can start to happen. 4. Predictability and safety. Another big piece of the avoidant puzzle is their need for predictability and emotional safety. This might surprise you because avoidants often come off like they don't need anyone or like they're totally fine with distance and disconnection. But underneath that independence is a nervous system that's wired to avoid chaos, because chaos is often what they knew growing up. Many avoidants come from households where emotions were unpredictable. Affection was inconsistent, or they had to tiptoe around a parent's moods. So now as adults, they're hypersensitive to volatility, even if it's subtle. What does this look like in real life? Maybe you and your partner have a small argument in the morning before work. Nothing huge, just a bit of tension. You think about it all day and plan to talk it out later. But by the time you're ready to reconnect, they've gone cold or even seem annoyed that you're bringing it back up. Why? Because to them, that unresolved tension feels like instability. And when things feel unstable, their system goes into protection mode. The same thing can happen if you cancel plans last minute, have inconsistent moods, or act hot and cold. They're not just reacting to you in the moment, they're reacting to every emotional memory that taught them, when things feel unstable, I'm not safe. That's why avoidants often crave reliable, steady interactions. They feel safest when things are calm, predictable, and emotionally low pressure. It doesn't mean they can't handle real conversations or conflict. It just means they need to feel grounded first. If you can show up in a consistent way, speak clearly, and keep your emotional tone steady, they'll be much more likely to stay connected. Sudden shifts, Big emotional reactions, or anything that feels chaotic, will usually make them retreat, not because they don't care, but because it sends a signal that the relationship isn't safe. So, if you're with an avoidant and you want to build trust, focus on being consistent, not perfect, but steady. Show them that connection doesn't have to come with conflict, and that love can actually feel calm, not chaotic. That's what starts to rewire their beliefs about relationships. 5. Affirmation over emotional demand. One of the most misunderstood traits of dismissive avoidance is how they respond to emotional needs. While it's totally normal in a relationship to want emotional closeness, reassurance, or comfort, avoidants often perceive these needs very differently. To them, emotional needs can feel like pressure. They might not hear, "I need comfort," but instead, "You're not enough unless you give me this right now." That triggers their core fear that they'll be overwhelmed, that they'll fail, or that they're going to be consumed by someone else's emotions. So instead of leaning in, they back off. Not because they're cold, but because they feel like they're being asked to carry emotional weight. They were never taught how to hold. This is why avoidants respond so much better to affirmation that comes freely rather than emotional demands. When they feel like someone is simply appreciating them, noticing their efforts, or accepting them without strings attached, they feel safe. Safe enough to come a little closer. But when affection comes only as a reaction to their emotional availability, or worse, when love is withheld as a consequence of them not meeting a need, they can shut down. They feel like they're being tested or manipulated, even if that's not the intention. Let's say you're feeling insecure and want some reassurance. If you come to your avoidant partner and say, "You never show me you care. Why can't you just say how you feel?" they may go quiet, feel attacked, and retreat. But if you come to them and say, "It meant a lot to me when you checked in earlier. That really helped me feel close to you now," they feel seen, appreciated, and are more likely to repeat that behavior. The first approach feels like pressure. The second feels like affirmation. It doesn't mean you can't express your needs. It just means how you express them can change the outcome. Avoidants are often more responsive when they feel like the emotional space is safe and non-demanding. If you can offer praise or acknowledgement in small, steady ways, rather than expecting them to perform emotionally on cue, they're more likely to open up over time. You're not lowering your standards. You're creating emotional conditions where connection can actually grow. Let's talk about one of the most painful and confusing behaviors in dismissive avoidance withdrawal. If you've ever been in a relationship with someone who suddenly goes cold, stops texting, or seems emotionally unreachable just when things were getting close, you know how disorienting it can be. One day, they're affectionate and engaged, and the next it feels like they've emotionally vanished. The most important thing to understand here is that their withdrawal isn't necessarily a sign they don't care. More often, it's a sign they're overwhelmed. And when avoidants get overwhelmed, especially by emotional closeness, their old survival instincts kick in. At the root of this behavior is a subconscious belief that goes something like this: if I open up, I'll be abandoned or consumed. That belief usually forms early in life when emotional vulnerability led to hurt, rejection, or neglect. So now, in adulthood, even small moments of closeness can feel threatening, not because they don't want love, but because their nervous system has been trained to see connection as a risk, not a reward. Let me give you a real-life example. Imagine you and your avoidant partner have been growing closer. You just spent a great weekend together. You opened up, maybe said, "I love you," or shared something really personal. Then, radio silence. They stop initiating. Their texts feel shorter. They pull back. You're left feeling panicked and wondering what you did wrong. But in many cases, nothing went wrong. The closeness itself triggered them. It activated that part of their brain that says, "This could be too much. I need to protect myself." When this happens, it's tempting to chase, to send long texts, call repeatedly, or demand answers. But that only reinforces their fear of being consumed. A more secure response is to give them space without punishment. You can still express how you feel, just do it calmly and with boundaries. Something like, "I noticed you've pulled back. I care about you and I'm here if you want to talk. But I also need consistency, so let's reconnect when you're ready." That way, you're staying grounded, honoring your needs, and not feeding into the old push-pull dynamic. Withdrawal isn't about you being unlovable, it's about them not knowing how to feel safe in closeness. One of the most frustrating parts of being in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant is the constant misinterpretations on both sides. You might feel like you're reaching out, trying to connect, trying to build intimacy, and yet your partner seems indifferent, cold, or emotionally checked out. That hurts. Naturally, you might start to think they don't care. Or worse, they never loved me to begin with. But that's not always the case. Most avoidants do care. They just have a hard time showing it in a way that feels satisfying to someone who craves emotional closeness. What often happens is this: your bid for connection, asking for more time together, wanting deeper conversations, needing emotional support gets misread by them as pressure or control. For example, you might say, "Can we talk more about how we're feeling?" And they might hear, "You're doing something wrong. You're failing me." It's not what you said, but it's what their nervous system hears because of those old wounds around emotional vulnerability. On the flip side, when they pull away to self-regulate or get space, you interpret that as rejection. So now you're feeling abandoned. They're feeling attacked, and both of you are hurting for reasons you don't fully understand. So, what can you actually do if you want to connect with a dismissive avoidant without losing yourself in the process? First, be explicit and kind with your needs. Avoidants are not mind readers, and they don't naturally pick up on emotional cues. If you're upset, say so gently. If you need more quality time, tell them clearly. For example, "It would mean a lot to me if we spent some time just the two of us this weekend." Simple, direct, and non-blaming. That gives them something real to work with without activating their defenses. Second, validate their autonomy while still honoring your own needs. This might sound like, "I totally understand that you need space. Sometimes I just want to make sure we also have time to connect. You're not shaming them for needing solitude. You're just placing your needs alongside theirs, which models secure communication. Third, avoid pushing or chasing when they pull back. It's okay to set boundaries, but don't do it as punishment. A calm response might be, "I can see you need time, and I respect that. Just know that when we disconnect too much, it makes me feel distant. I am here when you're ready to reconnect." This keeps the door open without feeding the dynamic of emotional pursuit and withdrawal. Finally, help them feel safe enough to move toward closeness, not obligated to. Avoidants are more likely to come forward when they sense that connection is optional, not forced. When they feel they can approach you on their terms without being overwhelmed or blamed, they slowly begin to relax. That's when real trust starts to build. In the end, it's not about fixing them. It's about understanding the dynamic and deciding if the relationship meets your needs too. You matter here just as much as they do. So, here's the truth. I want to leave you with: dismissive avoidants are not incapable of love. They are often terrified of it. They've built a life around emotional self-protection, not because they don't care, but because somewhere along the way they learned that closeness was unsafe. Underneath their calm surface is a nervous system shaped by early experiences of inconsistency, emotional neglect, or criticism. That's why love connection and intimacy often feel more threatening than comforting. But here's the hard part and the empowering one. You cannot love them into healing. You cannot teach someone secure attachment by abandoning yourself in the process. Overgiving, chasing, walking on eggshells, or waiting for them to change only reinforces the dynamic where your needs get smaller and smaller. That's not love, that's self-abandonment. You deserve connection that's mutual. You deserve a partner who leans in, not just when it's easy, but when it matters. And if you're with a dismissive avoidant, that only works if they are willing to do the emotional work too. Healing avoidant patterns takes time, awareness, and a commitment to growth. You can support that, but you cannot carry it for them. So what's the big takeaway? Be clear, be kind, communicate your needs directly, respect their space, but also respect your standards. And most of all, remember, you don't have to shrink yourself to be loved. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope that this video gave you clarity, comfort, and some practical tools to navigate this challenging dynamic. If you found it helpful, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss future videos where we dive deeper into attachment, emotional health, and how to build secure, lasting relationships. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your experience, what resonated, what you're working on, or what you'd like to see in future videos. This is a safe place to learn, heal, and grow together. Until next time, take care of your heart. You're worth real connection.